This video provides operational definitions of some key terms in the management control literature that would provide us with a common language that will allow us to communicate throughout the course. So let's start by considering what management control and management control systems can be defined as. Anthony and Govindarajan provide a generally accepted definition of management control as the process through which the organization's management makes sure that all organizational members exhibit a type of behavior that is consistent with the successful implementation of the organization's strategy and the achievement of its objectives. A management control system in this sense, according to law, in 1971, is a system of seeking and gathering information, analyzing them, and providing feedback in relation to the work outcomes of organizational members so that discrepancies between set objectives and operation sub-goals can be identified, reconciled, and corrected for if necessary so that the company's objectives can be achieved. Drury provides a useful insight in relation with the role of management control systems, and he identified this role as being dual. Management control systems essentially provide the necessary information to facilitate decision making, and they do so by communicating to organizational participants and decision makers within the organization the set of critical success factors for the implementation of the firm's strategy. By doing so, through this means of communications, they direct the attention of important decision makers within the organization to those factors that determine success or failure for the organization. Whereas by measuring and providing feedback and evaluation about the organizational participants' performance in these key success areas, they help the organization move forward. Drury, however, points to the fact that management control systems have a second role to play, which is more behavioral in nature and relates to the role of management control systems in affecting the behavior of organizational members. To the extent that the success of the organization's strategy depends not on any one individual, but on the whole group of individuals within the organization, management control systems, by breaking down performance in individual sub-goals, allow the coordination of activities of different organizational participants within the organization. And furthermore, by linking rewards and penalties to the achievements of individual sub-goals in all these areas that the different organizational participants operate, they provide essential motivation to those people responsible for critical action taking and decision making within the organization. But what do we mean when we say organization? A simple definition is provided by Anthony and Govindarajan, who say that organizations are nothing more than groups of people working together to achieve commonly agreed goals. Buchanan and Handzinski, taking a more psychological perspective, identify organizations as social arrangements that utilize available scarce resources in order to achieve controlled performance and pursue collective goals. Etzioni's classification of organization is a very useful and dominant one in the management control literature. Etzioni says that there are three types of organizations with different control needs, each one of them. He identifies utilitarian organizations as those organizations that use remuneration in order to obtain the calculative involvement of its participants. On the other hand, normative organizations use normative power and obtain more involvement in the sense that for these organizations, the participation of organizational members depends on the sharing of collective values consistent throughout the organization. An example for organization of this sort is, for example, Greenpeace, whose members very often do not work on the basis of explicit contractual relationships between the organization and them, and voluntary work can be the norm. Finally, coercive organizations use coercive power and obtain alienative involvement. That means that the members of this organization do not necessarily choose to participate even. The relationships between the organization and its members is more of power relationships, where the organization coerces its members to a specific set of rules, processes, and procedures. And an example of that would be a prison, where organization norms, organizational rules are imposed to those who participate in the organization, despite the different perspectives that may themselves adopt. Obviously, in this course, we will focus and concentrate on utilitarian organizations. That is essentially organizations whose members make a choice to participate in them, and for them to exhibit the sort of behavior necessary for the achievement of the organization's objectives depends on the provision of incentives for their performance. Now, we already spoken a little bit about strategy and goals on the basis of the last two key concepts. What do we mean when we talk about goals? Goals, also termed in the literature as objectives, are the broad overall aims of an organization. Goals are the raison d'etre of organizations, the reason for their existence, and they typically are timeless in the sense that they are set at the beginning of the organization's establishment, and they tend to exist for very long periods of time, changed only rarely in the history of an organization. Examples of strategic goals for an organization may include the maximization of profit, the maximization of firm's value, a dominant market position, different levels of performance, such as efficiency, effectiveness, or productivity, and other examples given in the slides. Now, the difference between goals and strategies is that strategies are essentially the plans, if you want, the roadmaps through which an organization will achieve its goals. Strategies essentially describe the way and the general direction in which an organization will have to navigate through the threats and opportunities that are presented in its external environment, and through the use of its core competences and the opportunities and threats that are identified, it will be able to maximize the possibility of achieving the organization's objectives. Essentially, as Antonin Govindaradzan identify, a strategy starts from the analysis of the environment within which the organization operates and the identification of opportunities and threats in it. An analysis of the internal characteristics and the strengths and the weaknesses of the organization, and the matching of the two to identify the firm's strategies, in other words, the plans through which the organization's aims and objectives will be achieved. Now, we defined organizations as groups of people working together under specific structures, systems, and rules in order to achieve some agreed upon goals and objectives. But one can see the organization from a more evolutionary perspective. Guy Mensa, taking such a perspective, identifies organizations as living, purposeful, adaptively rational systems whose, as organizations, survival depends on their ability to successfully interact with the environment within which they exist. In this sense, and through that evolutionary perspective, organizations grow through a process of constant interaction with the environment in which they exist, dynamically adapt their structural and functional characteristics to adjust to the changes that they encounter in the dynamic environment in which they live, and wither or die in the end if they fail to make those necessary adjustments that would allow them to carry on a symbiotic, successful existence with that surrounding environment. In this sense, as Akoff and Emery 1972 explain, the environment of organization can be defined as all the elements and the relevant properties that are not part of the organization, but whose change has the potential of causing or produce a change in the state of the organization. In this sense, the organization consists of all possible variables that are external to organization and out with its control, but potentially capable of causing conditions who can present opportunities or threats to the organization and its state. Examples of the organization within its environment are the uncertainty that organizations face as they operate within the environment they themselves find in, the competition that they may face from other companies within the same environment, the customer base that they serve, whose dynamic preference and tastes change and provide for the organization different opportunities and threats, the capital markets within which organizations operate and to which they have to adjust as they change, as well as the manufacturing and technological environment that presents to the organizations often opportunities and threats that they need themselves to adapt to. From that evolutionary perspective, therefore, management control can be defined as the means through which an organization is given the ability to carry on a meaningful interaction with the environment in which it operates. It is essentially the systematic approach to the general problem of collecting and analyzing information about the state of the environment in which an organization operates, one that allows essentially the organization to understand that environment and with up-to-date information to make the necessary adaptation in relation and in response to the dynamic nature of that environment. Control, therefore, for this perspective, is nothing more than the totality of the processes by which a system adapts its internal behavior in response to the changes in the external environment. It is essentially the system that allows an organization to adapt timely and effectively to the changes in its substantive environment, and makes one that makes sure that the behavior of all members of the organization is consistent with the behavior required to implement the strategy of the organization and the achievement of its objectives within the given dynamics of that environment.